Welcome back to the Charles Aris Executive Search Podcast. This is Casey Taves, Associate Recruiter here at Charles Aris, and we are back for another episode of our Industry Uncovered series where we dive into the world of AgTech with various industry leaders. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Amber DeWitt. Amber, can you please provide an overview of your role and organization?
Yeah. Hey, Casey, thanks for having me. I'm excited to join this podcast and dive in on how Fulcrum, my firm, really looks at ag tech and the role we play. So at Fulcrum, I'm the senior analyst. I've been with the firm about a year and a half now. Fulcrum is an early stage venture capital firm based in Kansas City, Missouri. And really at our core, we're a venture capital firm that invests in pretty early stage ag tech startup companies solving challenges kind of across that whole global food and ag supply chain, really with a strong focus on technologies that increase global food production, increase food security, or decrease food waste. And when you think about that ag supply chain, we really look at technologies kind of all the way from the petri dish, super sciencey, super biotech stage through the farm gate, and then through the process of turning commodities into food products. With all that said, we don't invest in consumer-facing technologies like snack chips or food delivery systems like Uber Eats, but we'll invest in biotech companies, software companies, hardware companies, both on the animal ag and crop ag side. Right now at Fulcrum, we have 13 portfolio companies in that food and agriculture space, and we're actively looking to invest in other promising technology companies kind of at that early stage level. Probably the most unique thing about Fulcrum compared to other venture capital firms in the space is that a majority of our investors or limited partners are sophisticated farmers and ranchers from across the US. So we really refer to ourselves as the venture capital arm of the US agriculture producer. And really because of that unique investor base, and maybe again compared to other traditional venture capital firms, we see our role as not only to provide that really extreme financial return to our investors, but to also provide them relevant opportunities to engage, maybe trial, maybe be early customers with innovative ag technologies that come across our pipeline and come across our desk that will ultimately allow them to hopefully sustainably advance their operations in an opportunity that other folks in their industry might not have because of their investment and relationship with Fulcrum. So really through that process, my responsibilities really fall into four categories. So first and foremost, one of the most important things of a venture capital firm is to source and vet potential investment opportunities. But once we make that investment, we really need to help those portfolio companies grow and achieve those milestones that they're looking for to make those 10x hopefully returns when they're acquired or exited from the company. And then kind of in relation with that, networking with co-investors and strategic partners, maybe from ag strategic companies, is really important to make sure we have the lens and the view on the ag industry. And then lastly, and probably my most favorite part of my job, is managing the relationships with our farmer investors. So if we think about what a day might look like at a venture capital firm in the ag space, one day we might be having a conversation with a company working to reduce disease and antibiotic use in the livestock space through maybe novel therapeutic products, or maybe a company creating autonomous robotic equipment to solve labor challenges for crop farmers. And maybe the next day we're looking and talking with a company working to extend the shelf life of produce or different food items, or maybe developing biological products that are alternatives to synthetic chemical crop protection products. So that's kind of the breadth of what types of companies we might look like on a daily basis. And if you think about an annual basis at Fulcrum, we'll hear pitches and talk to maybe 600 companies in a year. And at the end of the day, we're only going to invest in maybe 3 or 4 of those companies. So we have a lot of work to do to evaluate and vet which companies are going to make the final end of that funnel and become one of the 3 or 4 that will make that investment in. And really after we make those investments is when the work begins, and as Fulcrum, helping those portfolio companies reach their milestones and grow to a position where they can ultimately provide that return for us. So we're hoping for companies to grow in a quicker manner than maybe different other industries to ultimately maybe be acquired by a strategic ag company or a large corporation to provide that return back to Fulcrum and back to our investors. And kind of like I said, my most favorite part of my job is working with our farmer investors. And really, as a farm kid myself from Central Missouri, I find it really, really satisfying to work with the grassroots level in the technology space and to help the companies that we're working with understand what the real pain points are at the farm level. And we really get a cool opportunity to listen to our investors, to those producers, and understand what criticism or skepticism they might have about technologies in the space. And one way we do that kind of systematically on a quarterly basis is through producer panels where we'll invite maybe 3 or 4 companies in our pipeline to present to a subset of our investors. And during those types of engagements, Fulcrum, me myself, I really just get to sit back and listen and observe, understand what questions those producers have about specific technologies, what piques their interest, what reservations they have. But it gives those early stage startup companies that we're working with and evaluating really unique experiences and chances to get direct voice of customer from ag producers that I think is maybe a missing piece in a lot of innovation that's happening in the agriculture space.
Wow, absolutely. And thank you so much for that overview. I love how Fulcrum, not only covers all sectors within ag, but is so connected on the farm level. I think that is so unique and brings such a value, to what you're doing. So I applaud you all for that. And it sounds like it is never boring. So I love that. And thank you for the overview. And just out of curiosity, so as technology continues to evolve, what notable advancements have had a significant impact in the areas that your firm has invested in recently?
So I think if we think about the broader agriculture industry and some of the big technologies that have had success or maybe a lot of implementation, broad adoption, I tend to think of technologies like auto steer or genetically modified crops. And maybe on a livestock end, technologies like genetic testing that have really driven progress forward and genetic and from a genetic standpoint in the industry. So at Fulcrum, we're really looking for what the next advancement might be similar to those ones that I've mentioned, or maybe enabling technologies that really increase the success or the productivity of already existing technologies. And I think from an investment or venture capital view, Monsanto's acquisition of Climate Corp in, I think it was 2013, really opened people's eyes to the potential of technology in the agriculture industry, especially from our view as a venture capital firm.
Absolutely. So on a supply chain note, because agriculture supply chain, very important. So what technological advancements do you believe are needed to ensure our agriculture supply chain can sustain for future generations?
Yeah, I think this is a really cool question and important one to think about because I think sometimes in the technology space or the venture capital space, we have a tendency to always look for what's the next trend, what's the next big thing that is coming. But really, if you think about the challenges that are facing agriculture, they haven't really changed a lot in the last several decades, right? Maybe they're more extreme, maybe there's different political or environmental or social pushes. But for us at Fulcrum, we really try to think about what challenges are happening. And we kind of think about those in maybe 3 categories. I'm sure we could debate there's more, but labor availability, extreme weather, and maybe variable weather, and then limited resources. So right now we're facing a growing population, but that's kind of being compounded by the need or the push to reduce input use and even a kind of a reduced supply of input availability. So ag producers are really asked to be able to produce more with less in the coming years. And really how will they continue to do that and to produce with the extreme weather or the variable weather that they're facing? And on top of that, we see maybe a shrinkage of labor availability for farmers or for production agriculture. So we're really looking for solutions or advancements in that really check the boxes on some of those categories, right? So maybe from a labor perspective, that could be a hardware solution, an automation technology that reduces the labor required for planting or for herbicide application or for weeding or for whatever the job to be done is. But maybe it's a hardware autonomous system. Maybe it's a software solution that does monitoring or management that reduces ultimately the labor required from actually viewing and interacting with the plant or the animal. But it also could be a biotech solution such as novel inputs, novel medicines or vaccines, or seeds that require less applications or treatments across the industry. We also get excited sometimes when we see genetic editing or selection tools. And again, this could be both from an animal or crop perspective. Maybe we're breeding for crops that are best suited for a particular environment or a particular condition. And another area is maybe precision agriculture, or maybe the whole idea behind individual animal or plant level data that allows for more precise treatment that ultimately gets to a reduction of inputs. So that creates hopefully environmental benefits, but at its core should also lead to savings for the producer at the farm level. And maybe another example is early disease or more precise disease detection. And that again can be both plant and animal lenses.
Yes, absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head there. Absolutely. So suppose someone is introducing a new technology to your organization. So just say one of those 600 companies that you mentioned that you take a look at every single year. So what advice would you offer them?
Yeah, that's a great question, especially for those companies working in this space, because I think there's sometimes I don't want to say a lack of transparency, but every venture capital firm tends to work a little bit different in how they interact with startups. Therefore, it can be kind of challenging to know what to expect from those intro conversations with a venture capital firm. And again, I liked how you put in the perspective of VCs like Fulcrum. We'll see about 600 companies a year, and there are other firms who will see much more than that. And we ultimately only invest in a handful of those. So we typically say no or not right now to about 99% of the companies we evaluate. So therefore, as a startup pitching or having those early conversations with a venture capital firm, your goal is to really keep the VC curious enough in those early conversations to want to have those follow-up conversations to learn more. At Fulcrum, if we feel a company fits into our investment thesis, so it's somewhere along that ag supply chain, solving some of the challenges we talked about, we'll typically take the 30 minutes to meet with a company and to learn more. Of course, a warm introduction is normally helpful. It might give you some early, I don't know, evidence or positives in those initial meetings. But we like to know what the ecosystem is like out there. So we'll take the 30 minutes to meet with almost any company if they're related to us. But once you get that meeting, it's really important for us that you're prepared to open up a pitch deck, walk through it, and allow us to answer questions all the way. And I think one area that we sometimes get frustrated with or wish we could advise companies a little more deeper on is to be aware of the time allotted you have to meet with a VC. AKA, don't come with a 30-minute pitch to a 30-minute meeting, because that won't allow for any discussion, any question and answers, or really any opportunity to share about what future next steps might look like. And certainly don't come to a 30-minute meeting with a 45-minute pitch, because that just doesn't, you're trying to gain respect and gain, the desire to continue having conversations with the firm. So I think it's maybe cliche to say, put your best foot forward, but just be prepared to be flexible, but also leave time for discussion and for question and answers, and always offer to go deeper on specific areas in a follow-up meeting. Because like I said, at the end of the day, your job is to get another meeting. Those early days, you're not going to get a check based off one or two meetings. You're going to have to keep the conversation flowing. So you need to keep the interest and desire there. And finally, I would just really encourage companies, don't be afraid to ask the VC firm what their process is and what next steps might look like. Because again, A lot of venture capital firms handle their processes a little bit different. And at Fulcrum, we might have a couple initial conversations before we're ready to really kick off our diligence or deep vetting process. But other firms operate differently. So be prepared, know what your time frame is, and use that to the best as you can. And don't be afraid to ask for what the process is and what next steps might look like.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice. Thank you for sharing such in-depth info there. I'm sure some of these companies can get a little tunnel vision. They're so excited about their technology and product that, it's hard to kind of figure out what that meeting needs to look like in order to get to the next step. So I think that's really good advice. Thank you for sharing that. And one thing you mentioned in a previous question talking about supply chain was, the labor shortage and the struggle in our industry with that. So with the rapid pace of technological change, what talent needs do you think are being exposed?
Yeah, I think this is a really important question for founders or entrepreneurs of companies to think about when they're building a technology for the agriculture industry, especially if it's going to be deployed at the farm level. You really need to understand and think through what types of customer support or training will be needed for a technology to be successfully deployed kind of in that environment. And really ask yourself, is there an appetite for that level of training? And if not, how will your business model incentivize it? So many times when you're deploying technologies across the ag supply chain, and I think in really any industry, the decision maker who's going to say yes or no will adopt that technology is maybe different than the actual user of the technology. So you need to be aware of what's going to motivate the user to actually implement and try to be successful with your technology. One idea that's come up at several of the conferences we've attended recently is kind of the idea of a farm technology manager, maybe someone who manages and champions new technology at the farm level. And I think at larger, more sophisticated operations, there's probably people who fill this role, whether it's called that or not. But I think the interesting and maybe challenging trend to watch over the next couple of years as kind of the new era of ag tech comes to the farm is how will mid-sized and maybe smaller farms handle this? And I really think that opens opportunities in rural America for more tech-focused or techie jobs for maybe those really hungry technologists to find opportunities in rural America, maybe from a service perspective. So one of our portfolio companies called Rantizo is one that we've actually recently invested in, and they're an example of maybe more of a service-focused company to really support that as a service model or market in agriculture. They're starting in drones, really working to provide drone spray operators with the demand of farmers and ranchers who maybe want their operations sprayed. So instead of the drone operator going out and find clients and building those relationships, Rantizo is creating a platform to match that supply and demand of those who want their acres sprayed and the service providers who have the equipment and the knowledge and the ability to do that. But really, as Rantiza would say, drones maybe are considered the farm robot of today, but with the new era of ag tech coming, there could be a lot of farm robots of tomorrow. And Rantizo hopes to be kind of an enabling platform to build the support and the streamlined matchmaking of growers who maybe are wanting a lower capex model on their farm, but they need to pair that with labor or service providers who want to provide that. So that's an example of an interesting player in the space that is kind of looking to the future, maybe the next era of technology. And maybe if we think more from a corporate view, the ag machinery, the ag seed, the CP crop protection companies, they have teams focused on looking at new technologies. But I think with companies like John Deere having an emphasis on being true technology innovators, we're going to see a lot more emphasis or push from those ag companies to innovate in different ways. But I always like to flip maybe this question around and just highlight that if you're deploying a technology in ag or at the farm level, of course, the technical expertise to ensure your product is working and working well is important, but you really need to have that practical industry knowledge maybe that's a full-time employee, maybe it's a consultant, maybe it's an advisor to help you understand the reality at the farm level. And it can be learned, but you're gonna have to get your hands dirty. At Fulcrum, we sometimes joke that we're looking for companies that know the front end from a back end of a cow. Um,
Yeah.
like I said, that's just an important piece, of the story as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's definitely a balance there. So that's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up. So as we look into 2024 and beyond, what's one area of technology innovation that your firm's excited about as you look towards the future of the ag industry?
Yeah, I think maybe I'll be short and sweet here. I get really excited about technologies that allow for really specific, precise, or prescriptive applications. So some of that might be a software or AI solution. Some of that might be a biotech solution, and some of that might be a autonomous hardware solution. But really looking for technologies that enable precision agriculture and kind of the getting away from broad acre application or herd level application to more individual precise applications that really gets us excited at Fulcrum.
Fantastic. Well, it's been such a pleasure, Amber, to learn a little bit more about Fulcrum and just diving into the world of ag tech and your perspectives through your firm. So, unfortunately, that's all the time we have today, but thank you again for joining us and sharing all of your insights. And if listeners would like to get in touch with you or learn more about your firm, how can they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn. There's also a method on our website where if you're a company looking to join the space or maybe pitch to Fulcrum, you can fill out and submit a form and we'll get back to you. So reach out LinkedIn on our website. We're happy to keep the conversation going.
Perfect. Well, we invite listeners to tune into our other podcasts from our Industry Uncovered series. Again, I'm Casey Taves with Charles Aris Executive Search, and you can find us on the web at charlesaris.com.